What's going on, guys? Pete Nova here with the Faceoff Sports Network. I am back with Senior Bowl week news and updates. My partners here, Coach Z-Mac and Matt from the FF Mediators. What's going on, guys?
What's up, Pete?
Happy to be here.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here. We're pretty much in the full swing of things for the offseason, right? We have the NFL draft coming up. Right now we still have 2 weeks until the Super Bowl. The all exciting Pro Bowl is approaching as well, which we talked about offline. But we have some exciting stuff. We have the Shrine Bowl and we have the Senior Bowl. It's always a good time to see guys get evaluated and rise in their draft stock. Unfortunate and something that hasn't been talked about a ton, and I'd be curious to know what your guys' thoughts are, but there is a lot of guys that couldn't play because they went so deep in the playoffs. I know Sawyer from Ohio State and some of these other guys. Do you think that there's a chance that they try to change the schedule next year for college?
I think it might impact it a little bit. I think the playoff schedule has almost kind of helped it too. Keeping everyone locked in on college football itself buys a little bit of time for these athletes to be scouted a little bit more and added to the roster. Will they move it back? Maybe. I think it's just going to depend on what happens going forward. If this is a successful model, then yeah, I mean, you could certainly see them adding more players if they can add another week. Given the 2-week gap between now and the Super Bowl that we have.
Yeah, and I saw where they don't expect the committee to really make any changes with the playoff schedule and going into next year. So it's possible the Senior Bowl considers something a little different.
Yeah, we'll see. I definitely thought it was interesting. I know some of these, a good guy, when you talk about the quarterback from Ohio State, right? Like, could have really improved his stock by being here. And he's a guy that, could use everything and anything to get him up the board. And unfortunately, he's not going to be participating. But the Notre Dame quarterback is participating. But anyway, just wanted to kind of break the ice and kind of just get your thoughts. We have some guys here in the chat. I know Jared Fortin's here as well. We're talking about, we'll get into more of who we think, I know Jared asked who the Giants are going to take. We'll get into some mock drafts probably in the next week or two. Once the Senior Bowl is done, it'll give us some more data and we'll probably start doing some NFL mock drafts. So stay tuned for that, Jared. But we want to talk about some guys that stood out today at the first day of practice for the Senior Bowl. I know, some of these guys are my guys in terms of guys that we all feel a certain way about even prior to today. And some guys that maybe popped up that we didn't know a ton about and we're excited to see more of. So we're going to jump into our first player here. It's going to be Grayzel. Matt, why don't you take us off here with him?
Sure. I mean, there's nothing like talking about football when we talk about an offensive lineman. Looking at Zabel's stats, he can do everything. At North Dakota State, he played all over the field. You see there on the graphic, 6'5", 315. He's going to be a staple in the NFL. I truly believe that whatever team drafts him is getting a plug-and-play interior offensive lineman. In 2024, he played left tackle for North Dakota State, was a consensus All-American at the FCS level. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Zabel here, North Dakota State's a good program, and you see him going up against Power 5 opponents here, and he's giving them everything that they want. I mean, he's a great player. He's got great hands. He steps off the ball, fires, shoots the gap. Like, he's everything you want in an offensive lineman. I'm really, really excited to see where he ends up going. Because like I said, he played all over the place. Last year at left tackle. The year before that, he played right tackle. And the year before that, he played center, left guard, right guard. I mean, you name it, he has done it on the offensive line. Whatever team gets him is getting a guy that's going to be composed, have great fundamentals, great technique, and be a fighter. And that's what you want in an offensive lineman.
Yeah. I think, from what we heard, he had a pretty good day. And from what we saw as well, they do broadcast this on NFL Network and some good reps from him here. I think at this point, you're looking at a potential top 50 pick. I definitely think he has the ability to rise, especially having that versatility to basically, be a be an offensive lineman that can play multiple positions is super valuable in the NFL. Coach, do you have any thoughts on him before we move to the next player?
No, I mean, I agree with you guys. Then we talked about this earlier. The interior linemen, they're just so valuable and so underappreciated. And I think he can have an impact really for the next decade to whoever drafts him.
Yeah. Okay. So the next guy we're gonna swing over to is one of your guys, Coach. It's going to be your boy Xavier Restrepo from Miami. Talk to us a little bit about him.
Yeah, Xavier Restrepo is a guy I've always really liked his game. He's a tremendous route runner. He's all-time receptions and all-time yards leader at the University of Miami. I mean, they've had some pretty good dudes, so that says a whole lot. Obviously, his size is a concern at 5'9", but at the same time, I think he's viewed by pretty much everybody as a slot receiver. So where he lands is going to be important for his production. His comp, I mean, this could be all over the place. I do think at the combine, his shuttle time and his 40 time are going to be extremely important. But at the same time, he looked really good today, had good separation. He's a fantastic route runner. He's a guy that I really believe he'll probably go second, third round, somewhere in there. Wouldn't surprise me. And I really think if a team utilizes him in the slot, then he can have a ton of production at the next level.
Coach, do you think that can he play, outside, or is he going to be strictly most likely a slot guy? How does he project for you?
Now, I think he's going to be a slot guy primarily. I mean, obviously, sort of like, with Cooper Kupp, they can use him outside some, but I just feel like he projects mostly as a slot guy.
Okay. Matt, any thoughts on Restrepo?
Yeah, I think, Coach, you summed it up really well when you said he's going to have a good combine. And really where we're focusing is the shuttle and the 40. How fast is he going to be? What stands out for me with him is he's great versus man coverage. And we saw a little bit of that today at the Senior Bowl, if you're able to watch with the clip Pete just showed. I mean, he's got an 87 grade on Pro Football Focus against man coverage. So that's going to be his bread and butter. Put him in the slot and let him work.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I feel like when we look at this, even from like a fantasy football standpoint, guys look at slot players now because everybody wants that traditional big time, X player on the outside that can kind of do everything at this point. But, slot players, guys that in a PPR league, it's so valuable to have guys that can just, demand the football. And he's been, and Coach can attest this. I mean, he's arguably the best route runner in this class. And so, that separation, if he can go to the right offense that can get him the football. I mean, honestly, a team that makes sense, in my opinion, would be like a team like the Texans, who, Stephon Diggs was that guy that was playing in that power slot this year, that was getting a lot of the underneath work. And with him suffering the injury, with Tank Dell likely, we don't know what's going to happen with him. He could be a good fit in that offense as a chain mover and somebody to kind of help out with the underneath routes. Is there anywhere specific that you guys would like him to land that comes to mind, or not there yet?
Well, I will say something that comes to mind for me is I'm not saying he is this guy, but someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown exceeds inside and outside, and he's not a big dude.
Yep.
Obviously, and Restrepo, I'm not saying that's a huge comparison there, so I'm not going that far. But at the same time, Restrepo does have fantastic hands. He runs really good routes, and that's why that production at the combine is going to be super important.
Yeah. Matt, anything else to close out before we move on?
Yeah, I do want to add, you asked Coach the question, can he play out wide? I just looked it up real quick, and he had 725 offensive snaps. 644 of them were in the slot. So that's primarily where he lived, and I expect that's where he'll live still going forward in the NFL. Can he line up outside? It's going to – again, we go back to, does he have the speed? Can he handle outside? And I don't know, but I do feel comfortable with him being in the slot. You mentioned Amon-Ra. The other name that I think of is Chris Godwin. We saw him move back to the slot this year, and he was absolutely on fire to start the year.
Yeah. I don't want to say this because it might sound offensive, but kind of reminds me a little bit of a Sky Moore-ish when he first came out, what they wanted him to be. Now I don't think they're the exact same player, but a little bit, of a comp there. Hopefully his career turns out better than Sky Moore's. But moving on to the next player, this is one of my guys. It's RJ Harvey, running back out of UCF. He weighed in at 207, 5'7", and a half was the height. And, a little bit of, I was a little surprised to see that. I was hoping for, 5'9". Bucky Irving is somebody that gets comped a lot to RJ Harvey, and I see it a lot in both of their games. Bucky Irving, 2 inches taller, but when you look at RJ Harvey, he is very good in tight spaces. His lateral quickness, in tight spaces, is something that pops on the screen when I watch him. He had a really good day today. He's a really good route runner. There were multiple clips today from the practice of him just burning guys. And it's always tough on one-on-ones because, the defender is always at a disadvantage. And so, with that open space where the wide receiver can kind of make a move, there's not much leverage that the defender has in those drills, but he looked really good from the clips that I saw. And I'm excited to see him. I mean, he kind of reminds me a little bit of like a Maurice Jones-Drew. Both guys 5'7". Maurice Jones-Drew, I believe, played at 210, his weight. And you have RJ Harvey here at 207. So pretty close. And both guys that are very low to the ground, lateral guys that can kind of bounce around. But I'm excited to see RJ Harvey. I don't know where I have him yet for fantasy because we talk about these running backs in this class and it's super deep. And it's going to matter about, location, but a small guy like that is going to have to be utilized correctly. Whereas there's some other running backs that can go into some systems. They can play in a zone scheme. They can play in a power run scheme. And so, they have the ability to play in both, where he's going to probably be landing spot dependent, whereas some other running backs can be plug and play. And I don't see that for him, but I am excited to see him, continue to improve his stock. I think he had probably the best day out of the running backs from what I saw. But any opinions on RJ Harvey from either of you guys?
Yeah, I think Harvey is he's a little bit of a different case because when the season rolls around this coming year, he's going to be 24. So he's going to be older than a lot of these other guys. Part of that's due, he had some injuries and he transferred from Virginia Tech. But when he ultimately found a home at UCF, he was very productive. Like, he had a great year in 2024. There's no way around it. He's super explosive. He's probably the most patient runner in this class. A lot of Le'Veon Bell where he waits for the gap and then he hits it. And when he hits it, he goes full throttle. So I'm excited to see where he goes. I think scheme's going to matter. Who's in that backfield is going to kind of dictate how much playing time he might get right away. But I do think when he gets the ball in his hands, there's ability for him to take it to the house.
Yeah. Coach?
Yeah, I think it'll come down to pass pro for him somewhat. I think we saw that with Bucky. As the season went, his pass pro improved, thus his playing time improved more and more and more as the season went. That's the issue when you're 207. How do you hold up in pass protection compared to a guy that weighs 220, 225, obviously. But as long as he improves there, I think the guy can have an impact because he is explosive for sure.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I would note about him that I didn't bring up is, his pass pro, and we talk about this with running backs all the time, and I'm glad you brought it up, is, there's going to be so much talent that is now injected at the running back position this year with the draft. You have free agents, Najee Harris, Aaron Jones. You have a couple of guys that are hitting free agency. And so, to get on the field for these young running backs, pass pro is an easy way to get on the field. We saw with Khalil Herbert, and I always talk about him because just a case of a guy that had so much talent, but he could never get on the field consistently because he was always a letdown in pass pro. With RJ Harvey, though, one thing I wanted to note, and I did post this on my X yesterday, 69 missed tackles, placing him 8th in all of college football, not just his class. Scadaboo, and for to put it in perspective, I mean, Alshon Jenti had 150 plus missed tackles, and Scadaboo was number 2 at somewhere around 100. That just goes to show, I mean, Jenti on an absolutely another level. When you think about it, because RJ Harvey being ranked 8th at 69 and Jenti almost has 100 more than him, pretty nuts. But his 22 rushing touchdowns were also 3rd most in college football last year, which is pretty impressive. Now playing at UCF, the talent maybe not super great. In terms of what he was, not playing at a big conference, but I like what I've seen from him. I think in the right spot, I think he could definitely be a producer, especially in the pass game. So we're just gonna have to see if he's utilized correctly.
Well, and the thing I want to emphasize too is, and this is true of every position, but it's especially true at running back, is your landing spot really matters. I mean, Tyrone Tracy is an example of that. Like, we all got on board with Tyrone Tracy immediately because he went to the Giants and there was going to be an opportunity for time, so it all comes back to who drafts them and where, and then do they have a quick path to the field, especially if you're a 24-year-old, how quick can this guy get on the field?
Yeah. Matt, were you going to say anything, or are you ready to move on here?
I'll just round it out here by mentioning we talked about the pass pro. That's great for getting on the field early. He did have limited opportunities with that. Like I said, he didn't necessarily have a ton of playing time early in his career. This past season, he only had 72 pass blocking snaps. So limited opportunity really to sit in there and showcase that. Doesn't mean he can't do it. I mean, his Pro Football Focus grades and all that are all over the place, but it's just a limited amount of work we've actually seen.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And honestly, I'm sure it's something that coaches are going to really be looking at this week. That's probably something that they're going to want to make an emphasis to make sure that he's getting reps, in there. But all right, we're going to move to one of Coach's guys next. It's going to be Elijah Arroyo. Shocker, Coach, big Miami fan, tight end out of Miami. Coach, what do you got on him?
Well, Elijah Royo, obviously he had a big day today. He looked really, really good. He probably performed better today than anybody else. At least stood out the most. Good solid size at tight end, 6'4", 250. Miami has been known to produce some pretty good tight ends as well. This is a guy who at the end, middle to the end of 22 tore his ACL. Tore it bad. Didn't get back on the field until the last 3 or 4 games in 23. So he pretty much missed 2 full seasons almost. This was his first complete season with Miami, and he's just a phenomenal athlete. I think this is a guy you're going to see rocket up the boards, and he's going to go a lot sooner than people think. I saw Pro Football Focus has him as their 5th ranked tight end on their big board. I think there's a chance he could get up to 3 or 4, depending on his athleticism, especially if he continues this performance and his performance at the combine. He's a smooth runner. He's got good hands. His blocking grade is solid. I just like everything about Arroyo. They used him a lot as the H-back too. He moved around a lot. So he showed a lot of versatility in that facet as well.
Matt, any thoughts here? Matt, you've done a decent amount of scouting, in terms of the tight ends. You have a solid, you have a comp for him? Anybody that he reminds you of, or anything in particular that stands out with him?
I don't have a comp for him yet. He's actually one of the few that I have not completely scouted.
Okay.
But as far as I guess for his athleticism, Coach is spot on. He's a freaking athlete. Like, it shows up on the tape. You saw it there in the clip he showed. He displayed great hands today. He displays great hands on his 24 tape too. Limited amount that I've gotten to watch just from really watching Cam Ward, and he sticks out. And there's plenty of times where he sticks out because of blocking too. I expect him to be an impactful player. Like Coach said, I could easily see him climbing up draft boards and being drafted ahead of what a lot of experts or people think.
Yeah, I can't say that I watched too much of Arroyo this year. I know Coach, obviously, as being a Miami fan, you saw a lot of him, and obviously being on one of the most prolific offenses in college football. Now, the defense got them on the field a decent amount this year, so he got a lot of opportunities, that's for sure. But this is a pretty deep tight end class. When you look at, you have Mason Taylor, who we'll get to, Gunnar Helm, Loveland, Tyler Warren, Harold Fannin, who obviously Matt's a big fan of. And, we're excited to kind of bring more, to Matt's rankings on the tight ends. And, I'm pretty sure you did you drop your video yet for your tight end rankings or?
Yeah, I think it came out this week. I can't remember what day it was, but it's recorded, and if it's not out, it will be out here soon. So several names that we didn't even mention here, but I'm really excited for this tight end class because I think if you need one, it's a good draft.
Yeah. And just some more background on Royo here. 4-star recruit coming out of high school in Texas. Just a freak athlete, 17 touchdowns in high school for 1,200 yards as a tight end. And as coach said, battled through some injuries and he got back on the field this year and produced pretty well. So we're going to stay in the tight end room here and switch over to another tight end. And that's going to be Mason Taylor out of LSU. Matt, what do you have on Mason Taylor?
Yeah, Mason Taylor, son of the Hall of Fame linebacker Jason Taylor for the Miami Dolphins. He's got the NFL blood. And if you watch him on tape, he looks really good. Starting as a true freshman for LSU, 6'4", almost 6'5", 250. He looks the part. He's got solid athleticism, great hands. He's not afraid to put his hand in the dirt and block. He's going to be an impactful player for whoever drafts him. We see him here today. He put on a pretty decent showcase. I think Royo stole the day, but you see that catch there, and he comes down with it. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for guys that can make plays, and he's certainly one of those. Where do I see him getting drafted? Probably on day 2 or day 3. Teams that have a need there, I could see Washington reconnecting with Jaden Daniels. I could see maybe going to Cincinnati and replacing Gesicki. I mean, he's an athlete. He's got great hands. He can make a move. He'll run around you, run through you. He's just a good football player.
Yeah, from what I've seen from him, I watched a lot of his tape this week and really good yards after catch guy. Just a really solid athlete, good balance. I didn't see too much of him when it comes to blocking, and obviously as a tight end, the reason it's such a tough position to develop is because you're practically playing two positions, right? You're playing as an offensive lineman and you're playing as a wide receiver. It's a hybrid, right? And so that's the biggest kicker with some guys. I'd love to see him in the Sean Payton system. As a Broncos fan, I'm hoping that they go after a tight end in this class, and one that maybe doesn't take up too much capital. If he could go day 3 and slip there, that would be great. I'm excited to see how he tests because he seems pretty quick on the field too. Something that someone that I'm excited to see go through the process this week, and see him in the game this weekend. Coach, any thoughts on Mason Taylor?
Well, you got to be excited about Mason Taylor's pedigree, right? You know that he has at least an understanding of what the work ethic that it's going to take to survive in the league, and that's something that if you take him, you got to feel really good about compared to some guys with the unknown. At least he's been around it. He understands what it takes. I think he's a good player. I'm not 100% sure about his overall athleticism. That's why I said testing is going to be important for him. He does move very fluid. Like he looks like a very fluid player. So that's something that obviously will factor in. But we'll need to see how he runs at the combine.
Yeah. All right. And Matt, do you have anything else before we move on to our next guy here?
Yeah, I was just going to add real quick, Coach mentions we're going to have to see what he does at the combine. I completely agree. There's times when you're watching his route running, he seems to be a little bit erratic. Not necessarily something that can't be refined, though, because I think it's there. I really do. I think he can be a solid, impactful player in the NFL for several years. Not going to say he's Travis Kelce, but I think he's definitely going to be a player.
Yeah. Yeah. And this tight end, the thing about the tight ends is like I said before, it's such a slow developing position that, the traits are important, right? And you can build off of them as long as you see, as long as they have the size and the speed, right? They can learn the rest. And it's such a slow development. We've been so blessed in the NFL the last few years of having tight ends that have came onto the scene pretty quickly and made an impact. NFL was needing that for a long time. The tight end position was kind of getting dried up, but we've got such a good infusion of some young talent. So excited to see how he progresses through this week. Shamar Stewart is the next guy. Now we're switching to defense. We talked Grayzel, offensive line. Now we're going to talk another guy on the edge on defense. But this is a big boy, 6'5". He's weighing in at 280. I've seen as high as 290 him listed, so maybe he came in a little bit thinner. Wingspan is absolutely huge. I mean, he's just a freak of a man. And when you look at him, his speed to power is extremely impressive. He was another standout from today's practice. And pretty much can run through you, gets good knockback. And the biggest concern that I have with him is his hand usage. His hands are a little bit slow. And I did notice that on tape. But I mean, that's something that can be worked on with him, but he's a disruptor. For some reason, I get Jadeveon Clowney vibes from him when I watch him. A little more thick than Clowney. Clowney had a little bit more of a better, probably a better counter moves than he does. But he's a guy that'll run through your face mask. The one thing I would say is the stats don't really pop for him in college, which was a little bit concerning. You would have liked to see the production be better from a guy that's just has those elite traits and those that physical skill set. But I mean, he gets knockback, he pushes guys into the backfield, and I'm excited to see how he progresses. I'd love to see him get on the bench and see how much he can put up. Obviously, I don't think they do that here. They'll do that at the combine. But he's a guy that I could see being somewhere in the late 20s to maybe early second rounder. But that's kind of where I see him now, unless he continues to excel here at the Senior Bowl. But he's a guy that I'm excited to see. Any thoughts on him? I know he's more a defensive guy, but do you have any opinions on Shamar?
Well, one of the things that kind of jumps out at me with Shamar when I look at his numbers is, if you just look at Pro Football Focus and you look at his grades, his run defense grades out really, really high. His pass rush grade is actually rather low, considering. Yeah. And that's probably what you're talking about when you think about his stats. Like, the question is, can he get to the passer? I don't know. He obviously is fantastic against the run, but can he rush the pass? That's the thing.
Yeah, which honestly probably is why a guy like him might not push into the middle to high first round. He has all of the, physical, attributes and what you're looking for. But, in the NFL, getting to the quarterback is the most important thing when you look at an edge player. And so that might be what's holding him back. But that speed to power, being able to push guys back into like a running back's lap, is going to be something that is exciting for a team that's really maybe looking for, a 3-4 defensive end, where maybe he's playing and he's more of a run stuffer than he is more of a guy that's rushing the passer. Matt, any thoughts there?
Yeah, you've mentioned the limited stats. Coach mentioned it too. Only 2 sacks this past year. You certainly want to see that improve, but the run grades you can't deny. I mean, he's certainly stout. You see it in the clip you showed, just a straight bull rush pushing the guy back. That's impressive. He reminds me a little bit of Preston Smith. Just not going to do anything fancy on the outside, but just push you, maintain gaps, gap sound, be doing his job, and that's important. You need that on a defensive line. So a good player. I'm interested to see where he goes. If he can be paired with an elite pass rusher, that's probably his best scenario.
Yeah. And we'll see. I mean, we know he has the gifts and the abilities to likely become more of a power rusher, not a finesse guy. And so maybe that's just something. I mean, I think the slow hands do come into play too. And I think that's part of what hinders him from being a good pass rusher. But I mean, you could always use guys that are going to muddy up the run game. So excited to see him. And then our last guy, and then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this last player, and then we're going to talk a little bit about players that we're excited to see. Maybe they didn't have a great day. Every guy that we're talking about today are guys that stood out. And then we're going to talk about guys that we think maybe either, have the most to gain this week, or we're just generally excited to see them. But the next player that I want to talk about here, and the last player, is going to be Mike Green, out of Marshall, edge defender, 6'3", 251. And he really didn't pop in terms of when you look at the measurables. You might have hoped that he came in maybe a little bit heavier and maybe had a longer wingspan, being that he's 6'3". But with him, this is an athlete that's super twitched up. He reminds me. I hate to say it, but he reminds me a little bit of Jared Verse, where maybe not the biggest athlete, but somebody who has that speed to power and has quick hands. And you're going to see this on this rep where, that's one of the best left tackles in the Senior Bowl. And while he doesn't necessarily get around him, he gets good knockback. And coming from the biggest concern is playing at a small school like Marshall, right? Who is the competition that he's gone up against? But this is becoming one of my favorite edge guys in this class. I really like what I've seen from him. He had a really good day. Those are just 3 reps, but even in team periods, his bend to get around the corner, he can get really low to the ground. So I'm excited to see Mike Green. I think he could be and it's not even just the pass. I posted some highlights up yesterday on Twitter, but he can also defend the run really well. He was pretty disruptive today in practice against the run. So I'm excited to see if he can string some days together, because I think he has crazy enough, I think he has the chance to be breaking close to top 10. I think he could be somewhere around that 10 to 15 range is where I can see him getting up as high to. But I'm excited to see him grow. He's just a really fun player to watch when you see him on the field. Do you guys have any thoughts about Mike Green? No smaller school, and I don't know how much you've really looked into him, but do you guys have any initial thoughts on him?
Yeah, 17 sacks has got to be respected no matter what. Sure, he came out of Marshall, but even when he was playing this season, he played well against Ohio State. He had a sack. He played well against Virginia Tech as well. So I think he can keep up. And he had a sack in that game too, I should say. But, the speed on the outside is what's impressive. You mentioned him beating the Minnesota tackle. That's a good tackle. That's a good player that he beat. So that needs to be respected. I don't know how high he'll go, just given the other pass rushers that are in this class. We've got Abdul Carter, and then we've got the guy from Tennessee, James Pierce. But
Yeah.
I do think Mike Green's a good player, and I think he's going to go pretty high. And that pass rush is a game changer in the NFL.
Yeah. Coach, any thoughts on Mike Green?
Well, Mike Green is the polar opposite of Stewart you had up there a minute ago, where Stewart is physically imposing and all those things, where Mike Green, maybe not, but the dude can play. He's a heck of an athlete. His grades on Pro Football Focus were through the roof. Run defense, pass rush, all of those things. The guy has lots of burst and athleticism. I think this is a guy that's going to have a significant impact in the NFL.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point too. And against the Minnesota tackle, I think the biggest thing that stands out is, he's more of a, has multiple counter moves, and you see him get around guys. But seeing him at his size of 250 be able to kind of run through a big tackle like this, you'll see here, and get some good pushback. It's hard to say, did he win the rep? Did he not? But it's still a good rep against a big tackle. And so, yeah, excited to see how he ends up progressing and seeing how high he goes. He's going to be a fun player to watch. But moving on, we're here at the 33-minute mark. Moving on, just to get a couple of guys here. We're not going to spend too much time on this, but I did want to get your thoughts on, are there specific guys that maybe didn't have the best day? Not to say they didn't have a great day, but just guys that you think either, their stock has the most to gain or the most to lose, or just guys in general that you're just really excited to see what they can do. I don't know which one of you guys wants to go first.
Go ahead,
Coach.
Yeah, well, there's really 2 guys I'm interested in looking at. The first one's Jackson Dart. He's been getting a lot of hype that he could possibly get into the first round. I've been studying his film a little bit. Jackson Dart is a really good athlete, a lot better athlete than people realize. He excels in the RPO game. He's been coached really well. You can tell that the offense that he was in was really wide open, so he had the opportunity to make a lot of reads. So I think his stock could really climb, especially if he has a good Senior Bowl. The other guy is Tyler Shook. Tyler Shook is from Louisville, big quarterback from Louisville. Yeah, I think that's how you say his name. I looked it up. He big frame, 6'4". I mean, this guy looks like an NFL quarterback. He has a big arm. It's going to be interesting to see just, how he plays and where he can fall. I think he's a mid to late round guy, but I think he could have an impact and could find his way into the draft somewhere.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the kid from Louisville, I mean, prototypical NFL size, right? I mean, 6'4", I think 225, and he's got a club in his bag where he can run too if he has to, which is always a nice thing. You don't want a quarterback to completely rely on that, but the fact that he has the ability to do that is exciting. Matt, anybody that stands out to you? Did you have any opinion on the two guys that Coach shared about, or do you want to just get into your guys?
Yeah, Jackson Dart's going to be really interesting to me. Some people have him climbing up to QB2. Some people have him as QB7. So I'm really interested to see where he ends up going, how he looks at his pro day and at the combine, if he ends up throwing, and especially how he progresses this week. But for me, you've already mentioned his name once. I have to say it again. Harold Fannin Jr., the tight end from Bowling Green, is a monster. He looks like Evan Ingram to me. He catches everything. He played in the biggest games at the biggest moments. He was the best player on the field. Against Penn State and Texas A&M, he dominated. Broken FBS record for missed tackles as a tight end, broken FBS records for receptions as a tight end. The guy can flat ball, and he played well today. Didn't really do too much, nothing spectacular at the Senior Bowl practice, but Royo took some of that heat away from him today. But I'm really excited to see where he goes. He's probably my favorite prospect in this entire draft so far. I love the guy.
Okay. Yeah. And is there anybody else besides Fannin? Like, don't need a complete analysis or anything, but is there anybody else that you're looking to see more from, or anybody that sticks out to you?
Yeah, Martinez, the running back from Miami. We're going to keep talking about Miami players today, Coach, so enjoy the spotlight while you have it. He kind of looks like the hammer of this draft, and I'm really interested to see where he could go. Has a little bit of Brian Robinson in him, but I think he's more athletic. So I'm excited to see him as we go forward. I didn't get to see too much today with his group.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the two guys for me, it's really the wide receiver group, right? I mean, we talk about the quarterbacks, and just like the quarterbacks this year are kind of underwhelming. This is a pretty underwhelming wide receiver class than we've seen in years past. One guy that sticks out is Tez Johnson, right? We talked about him before the show, and I mean, it's funny because when you look at what most sites had him prior to him going to the Senior Bowl. Most sites had him listed at like 5'10". Believe he came in at 5'7", $170 was the final measurements for him. And you can correct me if I'm wrong there, but pretty sure that was the final measurements. I know he was $170 and he was somewhere around 5'8", 5'7", but yeah, that's a guy that, I know we talked about it and he had a pretty good day today, but he's going to need to continue to have good days and show that he belongs, because, otherwise it's going to be like a Trindon Holiday kind of thing, where I think about him with Denver, where he was really a gadget guy, where a really good kick returner, blazing speed. They're expecting Tez Johnson to run like a 4.35 is where they're looking at. That's where they think he'll run first 40. Is he going to be like a return specialist kind of guy that goes in like 5th, 6th round? Or is he going to be a guy that could maybe make an impact and be like a Roman Wilson-ish, where, he ends up rising through a good week here at the Senior Bowl? So I'm interested to see Tez Johnson. And then my next guy would be Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. 6'4", reminds me a lot of Cortland Sutton in some ways, similar size, decent speed for a guy his size. I mean, they're projecting his 40 to be somewhere around 4.5, which is pretty good for a 6'4" guy. But somebody who can definitely make a play at high point the football. And somebody that I think can definitely rise. He had a good day today as well. He's got a good catch radius, and overall good route running for a guy his size. So I think he can stand to benefit, especially in a class where you're just looking for somebody to standout, right? You have Tet, you have Ibuka, you have Luther Burden, and pretty much those are the big three. And then it's pretty much your pick your flavor. I like the kid Marcus Golden, Golden from Texas. I think he's right now my probably wide receiver 4, but it's pretty much up for grabs for who is going to take that 4, 5, 6 spot. I don't think it's very clear. It could be Restrepo, like we talked about before. It wouldn't surprise me. So we'll see. But those are two guys I'm looking forward to kind of seeing this week and seeing if they can continue to increase their stock, because there's some question marks with Tez Johnson, and I think Higgins can solidify himself as the wide receiver 4 in this class if he can have a strong week, because he just has the talent. But is there anybody else that sticks out? Anybody want to throw anything out there before we sign off here?
I just want to give a shout out to Ty Felton, the wide receiver from Maryland. Smaller guy, 6'2", only 186. Didn't really do too much at Maryland. This past season, he had over 1,000 yards, but he was 7th among wide receivers in missed tackles. He's a nightmare in space. He played well today at the Senior Bowl practice. So I want to watch him going forward this week, kind of see what he does, especially in a little bit of an expanded offense, because Maryland was a little bit restricted this year. But and I do want to mention, too, you mentioned Jaden Higgins. He was 2nd among wide receivers in first down catches with like 57. So when he catches the ball, he's usually getting a first down. That matters in fantasy.
No, it does. Especially if I'm in some leagues where you actually get points for first downs, receptions and stuff too. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much going to close us out, unless Coach, you had anything else that you wanted to add?
Well, I think the tight end class, obviously we know the running back class is really good, but the tight end class is probably the second best class out there. I do think this week you're going to see a little bit of separation between Royo, Ferguson, and Fannin, with all 3 of those guys being there and all kind of in the same realm of where they could be drafted. I think at the end of this week we might see some separation there between those 3 guys.
Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be fun to see. The tight end class is shaping up pretty well. Tight end, interior defensive line, and running backs seem to be the big 3 right now. Cornerbacks is also shaping up to be pretty solid. So we'll kind of see how things transition and kind of carry out. But maybe we'll do a recap after the Senior Bowl, maybe on Sunday or sometime on Monday or Tuesday. We'll come back and just give our final thoughts on who rose the most. And then we're going to start mocking. So we're excited for that. But that's pretty much going to do it for us, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back possibly doing some live shows later this week. But until next time, we'll see you guys then.